Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a Cloudy Sheep, and we are playing Command, Modern and Naval and Air Operations. We're playing the Canary Cage mission over here, where we have Morocco, or rather the Northern African Islamic Alliance, so basically this area here, having just attacked the Canary Islands, and we as Spain are dispatching a group of amphibious units over here to recapture that area. We did went through our sort of naval disposition in the last episode, and this episode we want to talk about a bit of our air assets that we have available and formulate our strategy over here. So let's start over here. We do have 3 ground airfields, which are over here. Move this over there. One is Torreño over there, which has currently the following aircraft. Basically, I think I'll yeah, this is basically the overview. So a couple of Hornets and some other units that we'll be talking about later on. Our main air unit here is the F-18 Hornet. So a relatively modern aircraft, I would say. And in the 2002 configuration, keep in mind that this game is playing now in 2005. So this is a pretty good fighter and attack aircraft. It's multi-role, but basically the main role is the fighter, and main role is really the fighter designation over there, but it also has an attack component, so that's why it's designated with the FA component over there. You can see it's a relatively standard good aircraft over here, even though this doesn't tell you too much. It's a medium aircraft. It's pretty good agility. Needs a bit of a takeoff distance, so it's not suitable for carrier operations, at least not on our small carriers. But it's a relatively good performance, really, aircraft with good visibility. No armor really, but that's fine. We can also see that we have. I'm not sure whether it tells us the. I don't think it does, the proficiency, but I think we'll be pretty good, especially compared to the Northern African pilots. Technology over here is pretty fine, so our sensors are okay. A bit backwards really, especially with the defensive ECM, so that's not that great. But we do have a good, I would say, radar technology over here. It does have an internal cannon, but that won't hopefully be that required. And it does have a lot of different configurations that it can be, or a lot of different weapons and different configurations that you can see over here. We don't need to talk about these too much. I think we'll rather want to briefly have a look at this. So good engines at a good top speed, which is also nice. Although there are certainly Soviet aircraft that might be better, and I'm not sure whether we'll be seeing them, but yeah. Here, these are the particular aircraft. So you can see that we have 15 Hornets, but you can also see that about 11 of them at this airfield are available to us right now. But you can also see that a number of them of aircraft, 4 aircraft over here, are currently undergoing maintenance and are not available to us at all. These won't be playable in the mission. They're just there on the airfield and going through long-term maintenance. We will not be able to reactivate them. And that might be true for some of the other aircraft down there as well, as you can see. This aircraft here, you can see that this is basically the number of the aircraft. This is the status, so it's basically parked. Can we see more about this? I don't think so. It doesn't have a mission. The loadout is AMRAAM standard CAP over here. About that in a minute. It would be ready to launch right away, and it has a quick turnaround enabled. So this is sort of the high intensity operations, because we expect that the mission overall is expected to last 2 days and 5 hours. So we want to activate these guys pretty soon. We don't have to activate that, but it's certainly very useful, especially in the opening where you want to grind down the enemy very quickly. The loadout here is an anti-air loadout with the main main weapon here being the AIM 120B MRAM, and that is a standard air patrol sort of pattern. You can see here the particular loadout in detail. So it has 2 of these MRAMs. We can also look at the weapon platform over here. MRAM is a beyond visual range, sort of medium range, really medium to high range anti-air weapon with a good probability of hitting enemy units, although that is certainly modified by various factors, and it has a good launch profile, so it can be launched pretty much at any altitude, from very low to very high, and at targets that are traveling rather fast and really far away. It's guided by all aspects, so again that's all fine. It has its own active radar seeker, so it's more or less of a fire and forget weapon, though I think it can be disabled. Now actually here you can see that there is some property, but it's fire and forget. It can also home on jam, so it's not easy to jam that weapon. Can act against sea skimmers, so this can be fired against cruise missiles as well, which hopefully we'll not be using, and it's really fast, which of course is very important, because once you consider this range over here, this is not entirely set in stone. If a target is moving away from you, and you can see that our planes here were capable of 950 knots, right? So if we were to be the target of one of these missiles, and we'd be moving away from them, and then the range would be drastically different, because this has a maximum range of 40 nautical miles. So if we are moving away, or we are at 40 nautical miles, and this is launched at us, we'd have some time to climb away or dive away, and then maybe be out of the range. So there's really some sort of interplay between the range and the target and missile speeds over here. So this is a really good, rather anti-aircraft missile. We also have a couple of sidewinders, which are sort of small range or low range, 10 nautical miles over here. Infrared seeking weapons, which I'm not particularly fond of. This is really rather close. So this is a sort of close-in defense weapon, but it shouldn't be really our primary weapon, and the game recognizes that in that it's telling you that, you know, here really the MRAM is our main weapon. Down here you can do different things with these aircraft, and you can of course mark several of them, but you can launch them just wide array or as a group, but we'll be talking about the ready arm pattern over here a bit. And here you can see the different loadouts that would be possible. The first 3 aren't that great or aren't that relevant. You can ferry them over, so just basically fly to a new location, put them in reserve for maintenance. That won't be relevant, but these are a bit more important. So here you can see again, it's 2 MRAM loadout, which has a different sort of variables over here. Here you can see how many of these loadouts we could support by our magazines. So basically it's telling us it probably has 100 MRAMs overall in the at the airfield, so we could load out this guy 50 times, 51 times if we're including the plane that is on the airfield right now and is loaded out like that. It's taking 3 hours to ready the plane in search ops, so basically it lands at the airport, and then it takes 3 hours for the maintenance crews, for the refueling, for the weapons systems, and so on to reboot. People always think that this is much lower, and that it could be that, you know, basically the aircraft could land, you could pop the things back on, and you could be back in the air in 10 minutes. But that's really not the case. It's really taking much longer than this. This is really surge ops, so this is really putting a strain on material and the airfield already. In normal ops it would be 20 hours. This is for the moment quite not that quite relevant, but it's a profile that is capable of day and night, all weather missions, and here you can glance some information on that. So you could have a combat air patrol lasting for basically 2 hours at a distance of 150 nautical miles from the airfield, and this basically is not necessarily that it tells you that this is what you should do, but this is basically a sort of normal profile. So you get to your area or where you want to patrol at a height of 36,000 feet, basically 12 kilometers. Then you loiter there. You're for 2 minutes in combat. You have some warm-up time at the airfield, and you'll basically want to have some reserves to come home well. There are different loadouts that we can pick, and we can pick a light version over here, which basically carries more sidewinders. So I'm not really convinced that this is a good choice, and because of the added weight to the aircraft. Oh yeah, there you can basically, by the way, see how many of these units we have. You can see that due to the higher weight of the aircraft, it would be able to stay on position a bit shorter, but of course if it has some combat, it would be a bit more capable due to the sidewinders. You can also see the heavy loadout here with a lot more AMRAAMs, which I find very, very nice, because AMRAAMs are cool, and the more you can throw at the enemy, the better. But of course that further reduces your capacity to load out. We also have some more versions down here. Maverick loadout here, again, it does have some sidewinders and AMRAAMs, although these are optional. The Maverick itself is, I believe, an air-to-ground unit. Does it tell that actually anywhere? Valid targets here. So yeah, surface ships, land structures, mobile units of tanks and other things. It's basically a heat, so anti-tank, 61 damage points warhead. So really guided, IR seeker, 2 meter probable range, not 90% hit rate, hit chance. So this is really a good anti-ground unit, missile rather. Although the range 8 nautical miles is a bit but at least it has a rockets of its own. We also have the Harpoon over here, which again is one of the most important missiles in the modern age in naval operations, and actually, you know, the entire game is a spiritual successor to a game called Harpoon. So this really is the thing. It's an anti-ship missile with a very, very high range, so 7.5 nautical miles, good hit probability, and sort of a good attack pattern overall. Do we see the warhead? Yeah, it's a decent warhead. You can target against ships only, but it's pretty good. And this is probably what we want to be using against enemy surface threats. Surface as in naval surface threats. But again, this is something that should be used in great quantity. So because as you could see earlier, ships typically have some defenses against these sort of missiles. You will want to use typically a lot of these missiles simultaneously. We only have 5 in this airfield, but I think that might also be because it's the most sort of inland airfield. So it does make sense that there shouldn't be that much. Harm. This is, I don't even know what the acronym is for, but it's basically an anti-radar missile. So, oh yeah, there you see, anti-speed, anti-radiation missile. So this is really designed to home in on radars. So when there's an active radar, you can fire this at a relatively great range and maybe try to disable the radar in the first place. So very useful sort of weapon. These ones are grayed out because we don't actually have these weapons over here, even though the aircraft itself could carry them. We do have these units over here, the paveways, so big bomb that is laser guided, though I think it's due to a bolt-on system. Yeah, I think these parts are basically bolted on a sort of standard bomb, though I could be wrong there. But yeah, pretty good accuracy, pretty big warhead probably, yeah, and nice nice overall ground weapon, even though you have to get in pretty close. You can see it has a laser spotter tracker, so what you really need to have is a laser spot in the first place, and that is provided by this pod over here, Nighthawk pod, which is able to provide up to an altitude of 12,000 feet. You can illuminate targets for these bombs. Similarly here, paveway I think is that picture is clearly wrong. I think that's a Hawk anti-air system. But yeah, it's basically a similar missile, even though it can penetrate. It has a penetrator bomb over here, so it's more used against hardened structures. Then you have these sort of dump bombs that are 500 kilo bombs, I believe. No, 500 pound bombs. Just basically free fall bomb. It does hit, but within a rather relatively high circle. So it's not that great, but and the range, of course, is abysmal. But yeah, it's basically bombs. You can see again that there are sort of different patterns over here. Here you have 4 of these bombs. Here you have 8, and just 1 drop tank versus 3. So this is able to inflict much more damage, but the range should be much lower. So here you have, again, you can see that this follows a similar pattern in that it tells you, okay, what would be the radius or the useful thing at a certain profile. Over here we had it in sort of minutes over a patrol pattern. Here we have it as a strike radius. So with these guys we'd have a 400 nautical mile strike radius with a high profile. That is, we cruise to the target at an altitude of 12,000 meter and then do a sort of dash on the target and release weapons at a relatively low altitude and get back at high altitude. And here we go to military speed. So these are the speeds. Cruise speed, that is of course much more fuel efficient. High altitude is also typically very fuel efficient, whereas this low range surface hugging profile at the high speed is much more fuel inefficient, but it will provide you much better coverage against enemy radar because of the curvature of the Earth. Basically, the lower you are, the better. And then you release weapons, and you get basically back with a bit of reserves to base. Last thing here is a bit of a bigger bomb, but other than that, it's basically bigger. There's not much difference. So the blast radius, of course, is a bit better, and the range is a bit different, but that's basically it. I think that's it for the Hornets for now. We do have a couple of other units which will be immensely helpful. Basically, this guy here is a tanker, so it carries fuel in the air and basically acts as a winged rogue unit which has basically brings a lot of fuel to our operational area, and I believe our Hornets over here are capable of tanking, of taking fuel from these tankers. Can we see that anywhere? I think we can. Probe refueling, yeah. So it is able to refuel from winged rogues. I'm glancing a bit over these because it's an easy profile, so to say. But it's a very, very important job. I can't stress this enough, because if we look back at this for a second there, you can see that from this airfield to our sort of operational area down here, it's easily just like maybe 700 miles or something like that. I think we might actually have a range. I think we had a range tool. Doesn't matter. It's very far away. Can't we even tell? Oh yeah, you can see in the first line next to the cursor it says 700, 800 nautical miles to the selected unit, so from this airbase over here. And again, these guys are only able to fly about 500 nautical miles, even on these mission profiles. So that would not be sufficient if we wouldn't have the tankers. The tankers are a mission enabler that is so useful. We also have we have two Falcons over here, one of which is in maintenance. These guys are electronic warfare units, so they basically provide not much in terms of weapons, but in terms of offensive electronic countermeasures. So at a relatively high range, they can sort of jam enemy radars and targeting systems. Or at least they can try, of course, but that it will be also very useful. And lastly, we have this guy over here, which I think is sort of an AVAX platform. So yeah, it gathers intelligence from different things, and has not much of an active system, but I think these guys will be very helpful in passive loading, in passive reading of enemy threats. At Machon here, over here, there are also 20 more aircraft, or 26 aircraft, 20 of which are available. So more tankers, which will be very useful. More F-18s, some of which are already in the Harpoon layout over here, and you can see, yes, indeed, we do have more anti-ship missiles in this airfield down here, which of course is very sensible. Yeah, but other than that, I think it's pretty standard loadout up here. But there are also some Orion craft over here. Orions are naval patrol aircraft, so not directly fighters, but patrol aircraft rather, and they'll be able to provide maritime surveillance. And I think we do have them in a loadout where they do carry some torpedoes. So I think these are anti-submarine torpedoes, and quite a lot of these things over here, which are sonar buoys, and which you can basically drop into the water, and they will just sort of listen actively or passively for enemy submarines. I think they also should have relatively good radar or something. Air search radar, underwater search, yes, that is basically the buoys, eyeballs. Yeah, so surface search, long range, yeah, 200 nautical miles. So these guys will basically be our scouts and anti-submarine units. And then we have Rota down here, which has Harriers. A bit of a surprising choice for land aircraft. These guys are, to be honest, a bit dated at this point. Their max speed isn't the greatest, and we'll have to see if we can actually catch enemy aircraft with them. What loadout do we have available? Oh, also AMRAAM, which I find a bit surprising, but yeah, maybe we do have some other loadouts here. Sidewinder, DCM I think is electronic warfare. Yes, defensive though. Mavericks, lightning port, DCM, Mavericks. Maverick is again some sort of anti-ground unit, I believe. Yes, so again anti-tank. We'll have to see how useful this is. Maybe in a ditch, and sort of we'll take what we have, of course. These are basically our air units that are on the ground over here, but we do have some more units over here in Group Alpha. Again, we have this aircraft carrier over here, and that also has Harriers, which are very useful in this regard, because they have, I believe, a very short takeoff range. Basically, they are able to take off very short distances. Do we see that anywhere? Climb rate, takeoff. Yeah. So it doesn't actually need any distance to take off. So it's very useful for this unit over here, where we couldn't sort of park our other fighters. The Again, as a weapon system, this unit isn't I don't fancy it too much, but sorry, let's look at the different loadouts. Yeah, we do have some bombs. Okay, good. Their speed maybe is not quite as essential, and we do have some anti-air missiles. Not that many, but I think it will be very useful because these guys are very close to the to the group itself. So it will be able to act as sort of a combat air patrol, very close to the units that we will want to protect, type of thing. You can also see that in the different frigates over here, we do have a couple of different helicopters, basically, which are very useful. Some of them, this guy is countermeasures, so electronic countermeasures, airborne early warning. So I think they should also have very good radars. These are basically just big helicopters that go up and provide an intel for us. Yeah, basically long range 3D. Yeah, radars over here. So very useful. But I would hope that yes, indeed, we do also have some of these units are configured in an anti-submarine warfare loadout. So basically, these guys should have sensors that help us against. Oh yeah, there we go. Against against submarines, but this one is a boy because we saw that. Oh yeah, there we have a dipping sonar. So these guys basically have a sonar that they can they hover over ground, they dip it into the sea, and they will hopefully find enemy submarines. And if they do find one, they can drop one of the Mark 46 torpedoes into the water, and that will hopefully kill the submarine. This guy also has a couple of buoys that can be dropped into the sea, very useful. But these are all pretty similar, I think. They're just on different platforms, so on different of these frigates over here. Over here, there'll also be some aircraft, but I think that this will probably look very similar. Yeah. So again, anti submarine, airborne early warning, offensive countermeasures, and it's also nice that we have a couple of these airborne early warning systems because again, this will be able to fly for quite a while, but yeah, it will then need to rest for quite a while as well. So it has about, yeah, I think about 10 hours flying time, 3 hours reload. So it's nice that we can have one of these airborne at all times, probably. I think that's probably it for our aircraft. There's not much more to say, really. You can see all the weapon systems here, and we'll talk about the window over here quite a bit later on as well. It does look fairly complicated, I totally admit, but there's not so much that you need to be aware of. For now, we need to be aware of the sensors over here. So for example, for the submarine, we can decide to turn off and on the radar, and sort of the active sonars over here, which in the active state I wouldn't want to use them because again, all the time when you emit something yourself, that's very harmful actually, because it is fairly easy to spot for everyone just listening. We don't know too much about the enemy. We do know they have a couple of airports over here and down here. We do know that they have some sort of marine, some sort of naval group coming in to help these guys here, so that's what we'll need to spot. But we don't know that yet. We do know they have some submarines in the area, and this could be one of them. With submarines, of course, we can fairly confidently exclude that it's a civilian submarine, because there's no such thing. But then again, we haven't identified this too clearly, and especially with submarines, it could be anything. It could be a whale, it just could be a blimp, it could be just some sort of artifact that we don't know yet. So, but I think what we will want to do here is have these guys move into that direction to scout out this a bit more clearly, and we will use a creeping speed over here, so very slow speed, just over the surface, just over the layer here is fine. So that profile basically tells us to move very slowly, so we are not detected that easily. You can also see that cavitation would start at 30 knots, so that would not be very useful, because at that point basically your propellers underwater start to be much more noisy. So we'll be slow at a fairly high depth, so about 100 meters, but we're currently at about 20 meters, so that's fine. Just over the layer means you can spot surface stuff quite easily, so basically that's a separation of everything up here. You can listen in much more easily when you are above that as well, so that works both ways. You are much more easy to detect, but also you can detect everything else much more easily, and if you are below that, that sort of acts as a barrier there. So just over the layer is a good profile right now. Fuel should be very fine, there's no problem there. Everything is of course working fine here as well. You can see that it has an estimated endurance of 3 days, and we're only looking at 2 days. Although, if we increase the speed, that of course will look much different. Next turn, we will actually talk about our strategy a bit, and we'll have to talk about a bit setting up certain patrol patterns over here, especially for these guys, so that they don't run into any threat without us actually wanting to do that. That being said, I think we can call this episode for a close. Over here we have a good overall understanding of our units, basically okay surface fighting groups, some submarines, a sort of decent, if not overly large, air force, which for me were the factors that made this scenario very attractive. It's sort of a limited conflict where you have everything coming into play: submarines, surface, helicopters, planes, and all that. But it's not unviable to completely do this. So, looking forward to playing this out. There will be, of course, no saves coming, and we'll just play everything as it goes. So until then, until next time, I thank you guys for watching, and I see you guys.